Welcome to the Great Man Within podcast. Every episode is designed to help you discover and live the great man within you. What's up, fellas? Just getting back in the saddle here after spending the last week on vacation out in the boonies in the middle of nowhere, Idaho. Now, Idaho is one of the last 10 states in the United States that I've not been to, so I was really looking forward to spending some time in nature. And I was in Almo, Idaho. If you haven't heard of it, you're like everyone else on the planet, because it's like one of those towns where you will go into, it's like population 12. And I was in this home, this big, beautiful home that was plopped down in the middle of nowhere, but I was surrounded 360 degrees by these majestic mountain ranges. And in the mornings, I would sit on this huge wraparound porch that I had with my coffee, doing meditation. I could see the sun rise from behind one of the mountain ranges. It looked like blood red rising up. And then I could see at the end of the night, it disappearing behind one of the other mountain ranges. There were rabbits, there were elk, there were wild coyotes screaming in the morning. I was near an Air Force base because these fighter pilots would fly super low over the home at 4 o'clock each day and just would blow your hair back. And I had a chance to just really recharge and meditate, hike, and build the future of this work. And I came back with some real clarity about things I'll be sharing with you in the coming weeks, months, and years as we're walking this path together. But one of the things that I came back with was this deep sense of gratitude that I finally built my life and my business in a way where I'm no longer the linchpin, where if I'm to go away, that everything falls apart in my absence, so that I'm forced to do business calls or check emails or just keep my eye on things while I'm gone. I'm supported. I've built my business in a way where it's distributed among other excellent people. For example, you know that Callie Simon, who's been on this podcast recently, was my first full-time hire earlier this year. While I was gone, she launched my new branding strategy on Instagram, all the assets and the socials she ran all last week. My new book is coming out in the next few weeks. All of that continued its pace. My emails went out on time. Contracts were signed. And then in the Great Man Mastermind, every Thursday night we have a call. Well, two of the men who were leaders in the group stepped up and did a conversation about fatherhood. And I listened in. I got to join as one of the guys, as a participant, and enjoy the camaraderie without having to hold the space or design the content. And it was just so amazing to feel that level of support and realize I'd been doing it wrong for so many years of my life. This structure allowed me to set up time where I could just truly unplug, come back with the most filled tank and creative ideas for the future, and also having a deeper sense of appreciation for Callie and for the men in the mastermind who are supporting me. And they felt great about being able to step up in that way too. So it's just a win all around the board. And I share that with you in the event that you have the weight of the world on your shoulders and are looking to shift that existence. Because as I see it, a good man can take the weight of the world on his shoulders and deliver it. But that gets heavy over time. A great man, the man that I aspire to be, knows how to distribute that weight, and in a way where it feels good for other people, where they can rise up. And that's exactly what I felt from the men who ran the mastermind this week and from Callie when I came back home. All right, so today we're going to be having a conversation about 3 ways to break your bad cell phone habits. Now, this is a bit of a reboot from a podcast episode that we did over a year ago now, but it is so prevalent now during this pandemic era where we are tethered to our phones. We're a lot more dormant in our movements. Our heads are down on our screens far more often. And the news is increasingly more provocative, more captive, more alerting. Sky is falling. And I'm finding that people are erroneously and not even to their own liking spending more and more time on their phones. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to go through a presentation that I've been delivering on stages around the world for the past 3 years. It's one of the I would say one of the most important parts of a keynote speech that I give around taking command of your time and technology. And I went over this about a year ago. And if you listen to that episode, this is a great refresher, especially now, so that you can build better cell phone habits, especially during this negative news cycle. So let's go through a few things first. Over the last 4 or 5 months, I've been doing webinars for large corporate organizations, small businesses, etc. And I've asked over 2,000 people one question, which is, what's the one word that describes how you're feeling right now? And people put it in the chat box. We scrape their answers. We put it into a word cloud. And this word cloud has grown over the last 4 or 5 months. And the biggest words that keep coming back over and over and over again, the bigger the word, the more the frequency with which people responded with that word. The words that keep coming up: stressed, uncertain, tired, overwhelmed, anxious. Those are the big ones. Stressed, tired, uncertain, overwhelmed, anxious. And then there's a whole other bunch of like bored, Groundhog's Day, nervous. Like 9 out of 10 answers are typically negative sentiments. And those have persisted over the last 4 or 5 months. 90% of the answers over the last 4 or 5 months to that one simple question of how are you feeling right now are negative answers, 90%, which tells me that if we are staying stuck in that pattern, it's not just the external conditions of the world that's creating that. It's the things that we are doing, our habits, our patterns that are keeping us stuck. Because I know plenty of other people who are energized, who are inspired, who are motivated, who are feeling some very positive emotions. And the difference between those two camps is intentional action. So today we're going to be talking about how to break some bad habits with your phone that are keeping you stuck in suboptimal ways of living so we can shift you to a higher ground. So let's start with the legend Steve Jobs. Okay, when Steve Jobs invented the iPad, most people don't know that he would not allow his kids to use the iPad. Why? Because he knew of the addictive nature of the technology that he was building. Chris Anderson, who was the former editor-in-chief of Wired magazine, which is basically all things digital, he wouldn't allow his kids to bring screens of any kind into their bedroom for the same reason. And he imposed strict time limitations on how much time they could use their screens outside of the bedroom. Why? Because he knew of the addictive nature of the technology that was being built. So I remember when I read these pieces of information, I think it was in Adam Alter's book, Irresistible: The Rise of Addictive Technology and the Business of Keeping Us Hooked. When I heard these stories, it made me think of, why are the titans of industry who see behind the curtain taking such precautions when the rest of us plebeians are out here just letting technology into our lives like it's the wild, wild west without a second thought? And I knew, as most people do, that we're spending too much time on our technology, but don't seem to be taking it very seriously in terms of how we change our behaviors after that. So here's some statistics that I found across various sources that kind of show the pervasiveness and the problem with ways in which that we're using technology that's keeping us in a negative state of mind. And by the way, here's the reason why I'm going to share these statistics with you. The reason why I'm seeing 80 or 90% of responses to that one simple question of how are you feeling right now as negative is because so many people are out seeking information that will calm their nerves, that will give them some sense of security or certainty for the future. And it's just not there. In fact, it's having the opposite effect because more and more people are finding more and more negative news, which is perpetuating those negative feelings. So we need to break our patterns of behavior. So let's hit some statistics here. 70% of office emails, like business emails, are opened within 6 seconds of arriving in a person's inbox. 70% of office emails opened within 6 seconds. That is a statistic that blew my mind. It almost sounds like unbelievable, but it was also in Adam Alter's book, Irresistible: The Rise of Addictive Technology and the Business of Keeping Us Hooked. Adam Alter, credible NYU professor, has written a few best-selling books. So I have reason to believe in that statistic, and that's mind-blowing. The only reason why email gets opened up that quickly is if we're constantly tethered to our phones. 80% of people have experienced that phenomenon known as phantom phone vibration, right? You pull your phone out of your pocket or your purse because you think you could have sworn that it either rang or buzzed when nothing happened at all. 91% of adults don't let their phone get further than an arm's length away from them because we are so scared of what might happen if we just miss that call that comes through or the next breaking news. But the one stat that scared me more than anything was 110. Some studies show that the average business professional unlocks his or her phone 110 times per day. If you do the math on that, 110 times a day breaks down to about 5 to 6 times an hour. If you're awake for 18 hours a day, if you're only sleeping 6 hours a night, you're checking your phone 5 to 6 times an hour of every day of your life. Can you imagine the cumulative effects that would have on your ability to stay focused, present, do deep thinking, the effect that it might have on your anxiety levels over time? If that's compounded, and we've been on smartphones for about a decade now. If you continue checking your phone that many times an hour, every single waking hour of every single waking day, what does that mean for your mental well-being and your focus as you go into the future? I had a chance to meet a man named Tristan Harris, who is the founder of the Center for Humane Technology. Right? Now, Tristan Harris used to be a design ethicist at Google, meaning what's the ethics behind the technology that's being designed that we're using? And he ended up leaving Silicon Valley because he was perturbed by some of the patterns that he saw in keeping us more and more hooked on our technology. The algorithms that are being written to keep us addicted, like teenagers addicted to Snapchat, or us addicted to watching that next Netflix show because it just keeps on turning to the next show without us, even asking for it. YouTube, algorithm designed to take you down an increasingly more sensational path from where you started so that you will continue consuming. When he saw these things, he said he had to leave because the technology that was being built was not to enhance the quality of our lives. It was oftentimes being built to keep us captive on our technology, which is very similar to what the news cycle often does, right? Like these breaking news and these inflammatory words that keep us coming back because we have to see what happens, when oftentimes it's way overblown. Tristan Harris also said that our cell phones are expertly engineered to keep us captive. One of his quotes is, "On the other side of your screen are 1,000 of the world's best and brightest designers working very hard to break down your sense of self-regulation." Let me say that one more time. On the other side of your screen are 1,000 of the world's best and brightest designers working very hard to break down your sense of self-regulation, which means they're doing what they can to keep you connected to your phone, to keep you connected to the app. Now listen, I'm not a conspiracy theorist around technology. I don't believe that there's some force that's working together to make our minds mush and then to control us. I'm not one of those people. I actually love technology. I love how it keeps us hooked. Connected with one another. I love the ability to FaceTime my family. I love how we've been able to do Zoom calls while we've been isolated to have some semblance of connection. So I'm a huge proponent of technology, but I also know what it's like to have it run my life. And the stuff I'm about to teach you helped me to reduce the amount of time I spent on my screens from 4.5 hours a day down to about 2.5 hours per day. And those changes I made 3 years ago. I'm talking about 2 hours of extra time per day spent not on my phone. Can you imagine what, say 750 hours in year number 1, 750 hours in year number 2, 750 hours in year number 3 have done for my quality of life and my presence and well-being? So this is why I share this with you, is there's an opportunity cost for every moment you spend buried in your phone, on a text message, an email, looking at notifications, small games. And we are great men here, playing much bigger games in our lives, trying to live our life of purpose, living our fullest potential. That very rarely happens with your head buried in your phone. One of the ways that we can see the issues of this is there was a 60 Minutes study that was done by Anderson Cooper, where he walked into a biometric testing facility. And in this biometric testing facility, they hooked him up to all these sensors all over his head, his body. They measured his sweat glands, his hormones in his body, his heart rate, all of these different variables. While he took his cell phone out, put it on its right side so he could see when phone calls were coming through, emails, notifications were popping up, but it was far enough away from him that he wasn't allowed to reach it. He wasn't able to take the phone in his hand, and he had to sit there for an hour and just watch this stuff happen. So when the administrators of this experiment asked Anderson Cooper, "Hey, how you feeling?" as you see like these emails, text messages, and everything pop up, he's like, I feel fine, normal. This is what happens every single day of my life. I'm pretty used to this. But the machines read out a very different story. As it turns out, every time his email rang, pinged, buzzed, flashed, or his phone call came through, or a text message or alert or notification flashed through, what the machines showed is that his body released cortisol. And if you're not familiar with cortisol, cortisol is a stress hormone that's attached to your sympathetic nervous system, right? Like the go mode, the part of your autonomic nervous system that puts you in fight or flight, or let's battle, let's go. Now, cortisol is a necessary component of your sympathetic nervous system. It's in my system right now as I'm recording this podcast. It's necessary to an extent. But when you are chronically in a state of cortisol production, this is where you burn out. This is where you have stress levels and anxiety that lead to panic attacks or sometimes worse. And our phones are expertly engineered to ping, ring, buzz, flash, and keep you coming back to it. Would you want to sign up for anything that puts you in a perpetual and chronic state of stress and anxiety? And that's exactly what happens because it's so low, it's low grade enough for you to bypass your conscious detection, just like it did for Anderson Cooper. So I got curious about this, and I went to a neuroscientist in New York City. His name is Dr. Josh Davis. He works for the Neuro Research Institute, which consults with a lot of the Fortune 500 firms on our brains and how our brains are wired for leadership or our brains are wired for stress. And I asked Dr. Josh, what happens to our brains when we're engaging with our technology that keeps us so hooked? And he goes, okay, Dominic, in order to understand what's going on with your brain and technology, you need to understand the amygdala in your brain. The amygdala is that part of your brain that's commonly associated with fear, fight, or flight. More specifically, as Dr. Josh Davis told me, it's the urgency detection system, right? Like your amygdala is part of the old brain that is responsible for detecting urgency, alerting us what's urgent. Now, way back in caveman times, our amygdala was the thing that kept us alive. If our fire was about to burn out, a rival tribesman was about to come and attack us, or there was a carnivorous animal that wanted to rip our flesh from our limbs, we needed to know about that stuff to ensure our survival. That's what our amygdala did to keep us alive. Well, our amygdala is still alive, our amygdala still operates very much in that way, even when the threats aren't nearly that severe. So when we're talking about our phone ringing, pinging, buzzing, flashing, it is expertly engineered to trigger our urgency detection system, our amygdala, even when that stuff is not important. Get this distinction. We are oftentimes responding to what's urgent, not at all to what's important. Our old brain responds, our amygdala responds to what's urgent, not to what's most important. This is why you can oftentimes find yourself buried in emails, text messages, pushing around your inbox at the expense of the most important things in your life. Building strategy for your business, working on your mental and emotional or physical well-being, spending time with your loved ones, your romantic partner, constantly putting that stuff aside because our phones get the most attention. Why? It's expertly engineered to trigger your urgency detection system. So I'm going to ask you a series of 10 questions. This is a self-assessment time that can get you really clear on, are you addicted to your phone, or do you have bad behaviors, bad habits with your phone that you need to break, which will help lend credence to these 3 different ways to build better cell phone habits, right? To break your bad habits with your phone. So question number 1, do you use your cell phone as your alarm clock? Do you use your cell phone as your alarm clock? If you do, and I've asked this question all over the world to like literally tens of thousands of people now, most people, 80% of the hands around the room, raise their hand and say yes to the alarm clock. Well, I'll tell you why there's a problem with that. Question number 2 follows onto this. Do you check your phone within the first 15 minutes of waking up? Question number 3 is, do you check your phone in the last 15 minutes before sleep? If your cell phone is your alarm clock, it is a virtual certainty that you're checking your phone first thing when you wake up and last thing before you go to bed. I found this true for me. My first 45 minutes of the morning were spent buried in my phone before my feet hit the floor. Last hour before bed at night, even when I can't really tell you what I was doing other than just pushing around minuscule, small tasks, right? Just by the very simple act of moving your phone out of your bedroom, you can reduce your screen time per day up to 50%, some studies show. But if you have your phone as your alarm clock, you are virtually guaranteeing yourself that you're going to get tripped up in the mornings and the evenings, the bookends of your day, spent in the smallest area of your life, which is your phone. Question number 4, do you bring your phone with you on leisure activities? Is it right next to you when you're reading your book or watching television or when you're eating a meal to pull you out of that moment as soon as it happens, as soon as it rings or pings? Do you bring it with you on your physical activities? I know most of us use our phone for music. I'm one of those people. But is your phone set up in a way where you still see the notifications coming through, even while you're on that 100-mile bike ride or you're taking that run, so that you can't even be fully present because that thing, that work or that breaking news is coming up to interrupt your thinking or your presence in that moment? Question number 6, if 10 seconds passes in a conversation that you're having with someone, do you break that awkward silence by whipping your phone out of your pocket like a gun out of a holster because it's just too weird to sit in silence with someone? I see this happen all the time, and most people blame millennials that this is what they do. I see this all the time with people of all ages, right? Can't sit in stillness, have to jump into their phone because it's weird. Number 7, have you experienced phantom phone vibration? Talked about before how 80% of people have, because we're so constantly tethered to responding to our phone going off. Number 8, have you text and driven? Have you used your phone from behind the wheel of a moving car? Quite honestly, if you haven't done that in today's era, you are qualified for modern sainthood. If you've never done it once, you are qualified for modern sainthood. We're constantly putting ourselves in danger. And I do it too sometimes, still to this day. Behind the wheel of a car where if a deer runs out in front of you, if someone else stops short suddenly, that split second that you need is not there because your head's down, think of how many disasters occur just because of that. Question number 9, in the middle of the night, if you've woken up from sleep to go to the bathroom, do you kind of find yourself going, let me just see what kind of emails or text messages came through while I was asleep for those 2 hours? You can't just go back to bed. You need to see what happened. And then question number 10, when a notification goes off and you are talking to someone else, are you secretly hoping that they will shut the hell up because you're dying to see that burning thing that's going off on your phone? You can no longer pay full attention to them. All right, so out of those 10 questions, if you were a yes to say 7 out of those 10 questions, then there's a real chance that you have some very poor habits with your phone that need to be broken. If you even said yes to 5 or 6 of them, there's still a lot of room for improvement. If you're a yes to only 1 or 2 of them, hell, you could jump on this podcast next time with me and you could teach this class with me. But chances are, if you're listening to this, there's some habits that need to be broken. And again, this goes back to fortifying your inner foundation during these times of change, because if we're constantly tethered to our phone in an era where there's a lot of uncertainty and negative news, then you are creating that life condition internally as well. So here are 3 steps for you to break your bad cell phone habits. Step number 1, quantify the amount of time or quantify your usage on your phone. I say usage because there's 3 components to this. Question number 1 underneath this, do you know how many times a day you check your phone? I shared this statistic earlier that some people check their phone up to 110, actually not up to, average of 110 times per day. This gives you a distinction for how many times you're going in and out of your phone, right? In and out, unlocking your phone, going in and out. 110 times is a lot because that breaks the amount of focus you have or presence you may have in a particular moment of your day, of your life. Question number 2 around quantifying your usage is, how much screen time do you spend per day? I said before, I quantified that 4.5 hours of my day was spent with my head down on my phone. That's not GPS time. That's not reading books on my phone time. That was me buried in social media, news, emails, text messages. Now, I'm not here to tell you what the right amount of time is, but I'm telling you it should be less. I haven't met a person yet, maybe other than my father, who needs to spend more time on the cell phone. So figure out what the screen time is that you're spending per day. If you're on an iPhone, they have that built into the phone. Or you can download Quality Time app on your Android. I think it's the Moment app is the one that I use for my iPhone that quantify these things. And the third question around quantifying your usage is, what are your problem times per day? Do you know where you go down the rabbit hole and sink more time down your phone than others? For me, like I said, it was my morning, first thing, alarm would go off, which was my cell phone, and I spent 45 minutes first thing in the morning before my feet hit the floor. 1 hour at the end of the day, 1 hour and 45 minutes. When I found that that was my trend, my problem times, then I moved my phone out of my bedroom. And then bang, I won't say that I got a full hour and 45 minutes back, but at least like an hour and 15 back. That was like half the battle for me. Okay? So quantify your usage. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is to turn off all of your non-essential notifications. This is one of those things, like the design is key. Most apps and phones are designed to have notifications turned on. They make it really easy for you to say yes to turning on notifications. And it seems innocuous at the time until you are like one walking notification, causing you to completely lose focus on the course of your day because your phone's going off. So I teach my clients to turn off all the notifications that aren't your cell phone ringing and maybe like text messages, if in case of an emergency. I've turned off all of my notifications except for phone calls and my flight app. If I'm flying Delta, like any last minute notifications of flight changes, those are helpful to know. The rest I've completely turned off. So if there's an emergency, someone needs me, they know to call me and I'll answer. But the rest of the time, I'm going in, checking my emails or checking the news on my own accord. I've never missed anything that wasn't able to be cleaned up. Nothing. Never lost a client, never missed an emergency by turning off my notifications. And then finally, number 3, replace your phone as your alarm clock. Get a clock in your room, go old school. The Philips Smart Sleep, you can get on Amazon for $45. It's got its own, it's got the clock itself, but it also lights up very gently in the morning. So it creates that like illusion of a sun rising in your room. So you don't have to be woken up by an alarm. Or you can get one of those voice activated devices like an Amazon Echo or an Alexa that you can tell it to just wake me up at 6 a.m. the next morning. So that's the third and final way is to replace your cell phone as your alarm clock. And by replacing your cell phone as your alarm clock, you can reduce the amount of time you spend on your screen by up to 50% per day. That one little shift can change the amount of time you spend on your phone by up to 50% per day. And guys, like we've talked about this before, the morning routine and your evening routines are the bookends to your day. They're responsible for the quality of the 16, 17, and 18 waking hours that you have in between. And if the first thing and the last thing you do every single day is bury yourself in your phone, then you're not living a life of greatness. You're playing small games in your life. All right, so those are the 3 key steps on how to break your bad cell phone habits. I'll go through those one more time. Number 1, quantify your usage. You need to know how many times a day you check your phone, how much screen time you spend, and what your problem times of the day are. Step number 2 is to turn off all of your non-essential notifications. Some people like to have on their email, their text message, and maybe their phone call, and that's it. I'm just down to phone calls and my flight app, and that's it. And then finally, number 3, replace your cell phone as your alarm clock because you can reduce your screen time by up to 50% per day. And if you want to read a book that really teaches you how to become an ambassador of your cell phone use, then in all screens, all technology, then read Adam Alter's Irresistible, The Rise of Addictive Technology and the Business of Keeping Us Hooked. And I'll link that in the show notes. Please be a steward and an ambassador of your time, of your focus, of your attention. And if there's one area of your life that needs that more than anything, it is your relationship with your technology. Because my hope is in these next 4 months, when I ask people, what's the one word that best describes how you are feeling right now? Instead of anxious, stressed, uncertain, bored, Groundhog's Day, I want to hear confident. I want to hear in command. I want to hear in control. I want to hear motivated. I want to hear inspired. And one of the only ways it's going to happen is if we disrupt our bad habits and replace them with better ones, because that is what a great man would do. Hey, as always, if you are looking to continue your inner work journey, head over to doinnerwork.com to our resources tab, or doinnerwork.com/resources, where we have a whole bunch of free downloads for your viewing pleasure and for your working pleasure. We have guided meditations. We have book lists. We have 5 practices to become a mentally tougher man. Go to doinnerwork.com/resources so that you can download and continue your inner work today. Don't just leave this as a listening exercise. Take it a step further. Put it into action, because action is really the only way things will ever change in your life. doinnerwork.com/resources.